Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of January 11th, 2021 be adopted as presented and amended to include item 4D. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Randhawa. Okay, anybody opposed?
Yep.
You are opposed or not opposed? No one opposed? Okay, motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of December 7th, 2020 be adopted. Moved by...
So moved, Barry.
Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Adey. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of December 7th, 2020 be adopted. Moved by... Moved by Councillor Randhawa, second by Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first we have a report from our corporate administrator regarding a development permit for 2050 Parker Drive.
Thank you very much. On December 3rd, an application was received for a development variance permit for the property located at 250 Parker Drive. The application is to vary the City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw section 5.2.3a, principal building height from a minimum of 9 meters to 9.5 meters.
1 second. Could you guys mute your mics while the corporate while there's no speaking? Thanks, guys. Go ahead.
Thank you. The full application was included with the RTC, including maps. The application as proposed is a minor variance with low impact to the neighborhood, and it's recommended that we would proceed to public notification.
Okay, is there any questions or comments from council? Okay, hearing none, the recommendation is that council approve application development variance permit number DP 2125 for 2050 Parker Drive to proceed to public notification. Moved by
Councillor Niche.
Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any discussion? Okay, anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Maybe you'll read out the item 4B for us, please.
All right. Resolution for the previous closed meeting was moved by Councillor Cunningham and seconded by Councillor Niche. The council review the applicants for the Prince Rupert Airport Authority and make appointments being Gloria Rendell, Knut Bjorndal, and Kelly Sawchuk, and that council release the resolution at a future meeting of council.
Okay, and 4C as well.
Moved by Councillor Cunningham and seconded by Councillor Niche that council review the applicants for the Prince Rupert Library Board and make appointments being Andrea Wilmot, Dale White, and Brendan Turner, and that council release the resolution at a regular future meeting of council.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have item 4D. It's a report from the corporate administrator regarding an application to obtain a trade of business license for FCC Enterprises Inc. Maybe you'll comment on this.
Okay, thank you. So on October the 20th, an application to obtain a trade or business license was submitted. The application is for the non-medical cannabis and non-medical cannabis related products. A resolution of council is required as noted prior to the application being submitted to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. The recommendation is that council by resolution instruct staff to provide a letter to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch to either A, support the attached application for a provincial cannabis retail license, B, support the attached application for a provincial cannabis license with terms and conditions, or to C, not support the attached application for provincial cannabis retail license. In accordance with the council policy for consideration of a cannabis retail applications, policy 100-23, The Provincial Cannabis Control and Licensing Act stipulates that the sale of non-medical cannabis by non-government agencies is subject to the issuance of a provincial LCRB license. Once the proposed retailer makes an application for a provincial license, the province will inform the local government whose boundaries fall within that proposed area. Once the application is forwarded to the municipality, the city is requested to provide a recommendation as to whether or not they support the application. If a recommendation is not received, the LCRB will not consider the license further. In accordance with the above referenced policy, notice was posted to the city's website and to Rupert Talks commencing on October the 20th. To date, the city has received 2 letters against the proposed application and 8 letters in the affirmative of the proposed application. There was no cost to the city with respect to support or non-support of the proposed application.
So maybe you can explain the process then, if council chooses to move forward tonight, what the process is in terms of how this moves about in the community until there's a final approval.
Yes, thank you. So with the approval of the application tonight, with council's approval, a letter will go to the licensing board to simply approve the continuing review of the application. It's not an approval of the application, it's that it goes to the first step, which would be that they would look at it, the licensing board being them.
So if the licensing board decides to approve it, then what happens from there?
Then they would return back with all of the necessary checks and balances that would be required of the retailer, including RCMP and security checks, etc.
Is there another thing that council does on their end? What would that look like then?
Yes, they will come back to council to review the application in its entirety. This is simply the first step to say that they would be considered.
Right. Now, does the public have a chance to speak to that at that time?
Yes, they will also have further opportunity to speak to that.
Okay, so if council chooses to move forward tonight, then there's another process, and then the final application comes with a public input period where the public has a chance to say something around this project and its location and everything.
Correct.
Okay, just so that everyone's clear. Okay, so before we put any recommendations out there, is there any thoughts or questions about this application and the process from council's end?
Just a question, if I can, Councillor Aiden.
Go ahead.
When we first began considering these kinds of applications, there was some effort put into developing policy around proximity of one retail outlet to another, location within the town's existing zoning. Is it fair to say that this particular application fits within the spirit of the guidelines that we set up at that time?
Yes, thank you. This application was reviewed by staff to ensure that it complied with policy 100-23, which is specifically for retail applications of the sale of cannabis.
Okay, thanks.
Other thoughts from council? Okay, so hearing none, I think, my recommendation would be that we move recommendation A forward to the LCRB, and we'll get them to review this application, and then we'll see any concerns from their end, and we'll have the final application be brought back to council, and we'll hear from the public as well. So I will move that recommendation A. Any seconders?
I'll second it, Councillor.
Seconded by Councillor Niche.
Councillor Niche.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, motion's carried. So we'll hear more about this project in probably sometime later this year. Okay, moving on to item 5A, report from the corporate administrator regarding the downtown core revitalization tax exemption program. Maybe you can chat about some of the amendments and then the process moving forward.
Thank you very much. So you'll see with the attachment on the agenda, there's been a number of edits and amendments that are shown in red for clarity. So we're proposing to move the bylaw to third reading tonight, which does still provide additional opportunity for amendments and edits, should that be the case.
Right.
So this is just for further review.
And so just to further comment then, so at our last conversation, Councillor Moreau brought up a really good point, which is not reflected in this this amendment. So what happened was our staff brought this back to our lawyers to have the review, and a lot of the amendments that are being made are recommended by our lawyers so that it's done correctly. But and Councillor Moreau, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but his suggestion was, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and it's the amendments I'd like to make to this, which we could set a resolution tonight to get staff to make those changes for our next council meeting. But it was that we have the Midtown District, which was to encourage housing, and then we have the New Downtown and the Marina District, which we want to encourage commercial. And so we want these incentives to reflect that we want to encourage housing more heavily in the Midtown District, and we would like to encourage housing and commercial more heavily in the new downtown and the commercials in the Marina District. So the idea is that we want to give bigger incentive for new commercial builds in the new downtown in that Marina area, not necessarily in the Midtown area. So did I capture that, Councillor Moreau?
Yeah, that was exactly my point, Mr. Mayor. And I actually came prepared with my suggested wording for two amendments to capture the spirit of what you just explained there.
Even better. Perfect. Go ahead.
You want me to read it?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so my proposed amendment, the first one would be, I'll give a little bit of context first. So I think the main piece for amendment is just being more precise and more targeted in our desired objectives, because in the whereas clauses at the start, it's basically left, quite broad that council wishes to encourage revitalization in the downtown core. That goes without saying. That's a very broad objective. But I think we're missing two very, much more specific and very crucial objectives. The first of which is that we wish to encourage the development of multifamily residences in the Midtown District. And the second is that we wish to encourage the clustering of commercial development in the downtown and Cow Bay districts. So my suggested amendment would be to add those two clauses into the whereas clauses in the introduction of the bylaw. Council wishes to encourage the development of multifamily residences in the Midtown District, and council wishes to encourage the clustering of commercial development in the downtown and Cow Bay districts. And then the second amendment being to direct staff to modify the Schedule A map of eligible lands to denote that eligible exemptions in the Midtown District are limited to multifamily residential.
Just writing this down, making sure we're capturing it. So just to clarify then, Councillor Moreau too, because I agree with those changes, are you saying then no incentives commercial at all within the Midtown, just multifamily?
Yeah, that's the spirit of what I'm getting at, and in essence, it's not to say that council is against by any means any new business, building on a vacant lot or redeveloping a worn down building in the Midtown District. It's not that we would, put up any obstacles to someone who wanted to start a business in that district. But what I am saying is that we want to be encouraging and motivating or providing financial inducement for something that we want to see, which is commercial development in Cow Bay and downtown. We don't want to be financially incentivizing something that's actually antithetical to the primary objective of this initiative, which is to cluster housing in Midtown and commercial Cow Bay and downtown. So yes, I am saying that I don't think we should be incentivizing commercial development in Midtown.
Okay.
Can I speak to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I brought this up originally when we were doing this, and I had actually made that suggestion as far as making it so that it was only for residential in that area. And the last I was told, and I believe that you were part of this, Mr. Mayor, was that you were saying that we don't want to discourage people that currently own properties in those areas from being able to develop their properties. I mean, by us not offering that to current properties, I understand in a perfect world, yes, we want that development to be in those areas. But the reality is you have a lot of people that have investments and commercial developments that are already currently in those areas, and we want to see those ones fixed up too. I would not think that by handcuffing them into saying, sorry, you only get residential and offer to do the tax incentives, all that's going to do is discourage those people in those areas from doing absolutely nothing to their buildings. And I don't think that's what we want. As much as I agree with on paper with what Mr. Moreau is saying, I don't think it's a reality in the sense that, if we want to see our town flourish and get these buildings, all over town that are already there, I think we need to offer that incentive to everyone. Now, maybe there's a way, maybe there's other ways around it, and we can think about that. But this was a discussion we had 2 months ago, and it didn't go anywhere then, and now all of a sudden it's asking to be changed to that again, and I don't think it's right. I know of a couple projects that are possible already in that area that would be now potentially in harm's way if this was to be changed in that direction, and I don't agree with that, because I think we want to see, as much as on paper we want to see things shift in that direction. The reality is that there's a lot of people that own commercial properties already in those areas, and there is people that are looking to fix them up, and there is people waiting for these incentives. Now, maybe we can say, maybe we only offer a different percentage for commercial incentives in those areas, but I don't agree with the motion, the way it's being put forward here, or the change of the motion.
Yeah, maybe I'll quickly speak to that too. Yeah, and we're just having the discussion here to make sure that everyone's all on the same page with how we want to go about this and making sure we do it right. So that's good. And I do agree with you, Councillor Niche, that there is just reality as well as what we want to incentivize. And my view, because I do agree with what Councillor Moreau is saying here, is that we want to make sure that the primary encouragement in the Midtown is housing. The idea is not to just have a free-for-all so that people do where they want to go. But I do think that there may be some projects that might just come up. And, we don't want to have more retail down in the Midtown. We want to have more clustering that retail in the new downtown and in the Cal Bay District area. So my thought was we could look at it something like, if you did a 10-year housing tax break for the Midtown and only a 5-year commercial tax break for Midtown, and then but the 10-year big tax breaks go for the new downtown and the Cal Bay District, so that what we're saying to people is, look, if you do housing in the Midtown, you're going to get the full 10-year. But if you happen to own a property and you happen to have a commercial development that you're going to go ahead with anyways, yes, there should probably be some incentive there. And that's why I think we should do maybe a 5-year one in the Midtown. But it's not the primary motivation for that area, so that we can continually making sure that people realize that the big tax break comes when you go into the new downtown and the new and then into the Cal Bay District. So that was a way I was thinking that maybe we can compromise on the balancing reality versus our wishes. Because you're right, there are people that own property in the Midtown. They're probably going to go ahead and do some sort of commercial enterprise, and I don't feel like they should be able to have a part of a sum tax incentive in that area, even though we do want to encourage housing mainly. And also just making sure that, some of these folks, if they're doing commercial, if they build housing into their commercial units on the top and stuff, they can qualify for the full incentive. So that was kind of how I was thinking we could maybe compromise with this particular conundrum. But I think the ultimate goal here is that we definitely want to make sure there is an incentive for getting people off the ground. And then ultimately that kind of renovation incentive applies across the board, no matter what zone you're in. So there will be people that own an existing building, and if they do over $50,000 worth of renovations, that they get qualified for that existing building renovations, no matter where they are. So I don't know what you think about that, Councillor Nation, Councillor Moreau, as a compromise, but I'm trying to figure out a way that we can do some sort of incentive in the Midtown for commercial, but it's not so overpowering that we're not putting the clear intention that housing is our primary goal for that area. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Councillor Morrow.
I got an idea there, Councillor Niche, as far as making it simple. And I think that how about this? You keep the incentives the same for across the board for everything, but the one thing that you do is on empty land in that Midtown district, it is not available as far as if there's not currently a building on it that you want to either replace or rebuild, and it's just an empty lot. An empty lot does not apply for the commercial tax incentive. But if you have a building that's on that currently, that's a commercial building, and you want to tear it down and build a new building, then you could use that tax incentive completely and fully, just like anybody else. I think that's a simple way of keeping it. It keeps it simple across the board. But what it does is that any of those empty lots in that area, now they will have to concentrate on residential. So what it'll do is it'll just mainly be residential, and then there'll be small, buildings in that area that will still have commercial, because we can't. I think it should be fair across the board, and you can't penalize someone who had an investment that they bought 5 years ago, and all of a sudden we're coming up with a policy, and they don't get to take advantage of that policy like everybody else. I think that's kind of unfair, because it is our downtown right now. It is currently our downtown, and it will kind of always be our downtown. And encouraging that multifamily, residential housing in that area can be done just by saying, how about we do the empty lots? You build the empty lots, you get the 10 years. If you build commercial on empty lots, you don't get it. You just get, you don't get nothing, right? You know what I mean? Like if it's empty lot, you don't get nothing. What do you think of
that? Can I just respond to that, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So, at first glance, I think that is, or the suggestion of restricting the incentive in Midtown commercial to just new builds versus improvements brings Councillor Niche a little closer to my position. But I do want to make this point about why I suggested the amendment the way that I did. And I mean, it's really no secret that we spent a lot of time and money, I should say, on the redesign Rupert process. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from achieving such an amazing degree of consensus in the community was that our downtown, as it currently is 3 times too large for our current population. And so I don't think we want to incentivize any new commercial development in the Midtown District. We do, to Councillor Niche's point, want to encourage existing commercial operations to fix up their existing buildings. But I actually think, on the contrary, we want to discourage new commercial development in the Midtown District, specifically because we want to overcome the existing problem that everyone always talks about, of that missing tooth syndrome, where we have these pockets of vibrancy in Cow Bay, and you can even argue on the, closer to Five Corners, separated by vacant lots and worn down buildings spread too far apart, and it's just not appealing for people to walk between. And so if we do a carte blanche approval for incentives for commercial development all the way across Midtown, all the way down through downtown and Cow Bay, all we're going to do is actually perpetuate that problem. So what I'm stuck with, and not wanting to quite come all the way to Councillor Niche's position, is that by not delineating the specific areas and the desired activities, the way that it currently reads to me is not only is the bylaw going to then be incompatible with our desire to allow or to cluster commercial development, it's actually irreconcilable. It's contradictory to. You could use any synonym. It's at odds with. It's inconsistent. I can't square that circle. So that's where I'm stuck. And the only other thing I would add just in the power of incentivization or inducements or motivations. By not doing something or by not offering something to someone, we're not actively discouraging them. What we're trying to do is induce people to do what we want, which is invest in commercial enterprises in Cow Bay and downtown and invest in housing in Midtown District. So all I would adapt is, the statement that when you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to nobody. So if we try to offer an incentive to everyone to accomplish everything, we don't end up actually accomplishing what I think our main goal is here, which is open up more multifamily residential, encroaching on downtown, get more people living downtown so that there's more people to patronize these businesses, and then cluster our downtown in a smaller footprint so that everything is as walkable as possible. So that's where I'm stuck. I think Councillor Niche sees my main point. It's obvious that I'm hoping that he's going to come closer, but that's really what my main struggle is. We want to incentivize the things that we want. We don't want to actively discourage those things that we know we do want, which is people actually investing in existing businesses. I have no problem with that, but that's the key difference here.
I'll rebut to that if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, I want to use an example here, Councillor Moreau. Let's say somebody wanted to open a drive-through Tim Hortons, and I'm just using that as a full-out example here. Now, if you go with the current, recommended, midtown, downtown, that scenario, yes, on paper, I get the whole idea of our community being, our downtown being too big, and I understand that. But the reality is that downtown area currently, there is nowhere in that area that really has any empty lots that would be sufficient of doing that. And really, there's no empty lots other than maybe the New Moon restaurant. Sure, there is some empty buildings, but none of those properties would be big enough or work for that application. There is probably a lot more buildings down from in the Midtown area and properties that are big enough where somebody can actually build something like that. And they may have a building on that property currently that they want to rebuild or replace to make that happen. And like I said, I understand on paper, it makes sense if we were redesigning our town, if we were to knock every building downtown down and start with a fresh slate. I have no problems agreeing with everything you're saying, but that's not what we have. We have a lot of buildings that are downtown already. There's really not a lot of empty spots in that downtown area that anybody can really do much with. Example, Tim Hortons drive-through or something like, and I'm only using that example. That's just an example. But in that Midtown area, you have a lot of properties that are more able to do that, or and a lot of commercial buildings that need to be developed down there. So I truly believe that if to make it fair, I think we just do it across the board, and it makes the policy simple, which I know that making the policy less confusing is probably a better way to go. It's just easy to work with across the board for everyone. But like I said, if you put in that one policy where if it's an empty lot, then you don't get that commercial development part of it. But if you have an existing building, you do. And I think that's a simple solution to it. So what's that's only going to encourage people fix the current ones they have, and if not, then they're going to have to go with residential housing in order to benefit from those incentives. So all that's going to do is give us all the buildings that are currently there, get them fixed up, and give them the same opportunity as everyone else, and take the empty lots and say, these are residential. And I think that kind of, gets us through the problem of I don't want to discourage anybody from fixing anything up, and I don't want to discourage people from wanting to, or not being happy with an investment that they may have made. I mean, who knows? I mean, some of these could be family properties that have been owned for half a century, or some of them could be something that someone bought last year with plans. You know, and us been talking about this for quite a while. I would hate to see people discouraged from that, and I just want to see things fixed up. On paper, you are 100% right. On reality, I can't agree with it, and I would go, if I could make my motion, it would be to make it so that empty lots do not apply to commercial developments in Midtown, and only existing buildings, which you could tear them down and build them again, but you couldn't just get an empty lot and build on it, if you get what I'm saying.
Let's keep a discussion going, and I don't think we should put any resolutions on the floor right now because I think there's some working out here for sure. I want to maybe hear from other councillors about some of the trajectory, because I am torn between understanding completely what Councillor Moreau is saying personally. I totally understand that 100%. But at the same time, also understand what Councillor Niche is saying, because, you know, we do know that there are people that do own a whole bunch of properties in the Midtown and want to do some sort of commercial development there. And, you know, they want to potentially be incentivized to do those things there too, right? But we don't want to do what Blair's saying, which is, you know, continuing with this toothless smile. But at the same time, how do you make it work where, you know, it's not just pigeonholing people into taking those investments they've made and now they only can do housing? I mean, they can go ahead and do commercial development and not be incentivized with that. But, you know, it's how do you try to make it beneficial to everybody is what I guess where I'm at. And I don't know if that's possible in this circumstance based on the objectives we're trying to do. But yeah, I would love to see people who have made investments in Prince Rupert to be able to benefit from the investments they're making and get those projects off the ground. I see our city manager's got something to say.
Yeah, I would just remind everybody that you know, typically if you wanted to really change things, you would change the zoning. So you would take properties that are zone one thing and zone them for what you want. Council hasn't done that. You've taken away no rights of anyone who's in those existing areas. All you've done is tried to incentivize what you think is appropriate in terms of the plan, which is fully supported by the community. So we're not taking anything away from anyone. The commercial properties down there are still proposed to be zoned commercially. All you're doing is you're saying you're only going to incentivize those things that the plan said you wanted to happen in the future. I think that, you know, if people want to do something with their commercial buildings or whatever in those areas, they're more than free to do it. You know, a more sort of, I would call it draconian, but a more draconian approach would have been to say, no, we're going to take all the commercial property and we're going to zone it as multiple residential, which council has every right to do. And say, therefore, now you're non-conforming with your commercial and you won't be able to do commercial anymore. You will have to then, but that's not what you've done. Yeah, absolutely not what you've done. You've taken away no development rights from anyone, but you've incentivized, in other words, you're benefiting somebody at great expense to the next few, or for the next taxpayers that are going to be here. They're going to not gather that typical revenue which the city desperately needs, and you've traded that for people to do what you've asked them to do in accordance with a plan that is fully subscribed and supported by the community. So I'm not sure why we're concerned that somehow we're taking things away. No, we are not incentivizing things that we don't want. And I think that, and at great cost to the future taxpayers, because we won't get those revenues from those properties that are incentivized. So I think that's a fair trade, and everybody else is neutral at worst. So those are my comments.
Maybe some thoughts from council. Sorry. Okay.
Should have been from council. Yes.
It's Barry here. I tend to lean more towards what Councillor Nice is saying. in fact, I think it doesn't go far enough, but I could support that versus the First Amendment. I think we've got to give people as much incentive as possible to redevelop or build in those areas, and if we don't, it's just going to languish like it is. It's people have to have some incentive to fix up what's there. Look what's around town right now, and we're constantly saying we got to clean up, we got to clean up, and there's no incentive whatsoever to clean up. Whether it's if it's a straight commercial building, why clean it up then if there's no incentive? So I really tend to lean more towards Councillor Neese's proposal. That's just my 2 bits worth. I'd like to see it extended to an empty lot. If somebody just wants to put in a nice commercial building there, so be it. Anyone that wants to spend money right now in town, I think we should give them some sort of incentive. And as far as our downtown's too big for our existing population, we're constantly talking about how we're going to grow, and then the downtown area might be too small. So if we're by saying the downtown area is too large for our present population. Well, I hope our present population outgrows that. And so far the projections we've got with the port and other things, it's going to happen. So I think we're being kind of short-minded by making that statement, and I really do encourage any type of incentive that's going to get people off their butts and fix their buildings up.
Other comments?
Councillor Ady, I have a thought if I have a chance now. I think what we have here is we're kind of caught between what I share Councillor Moreau's enthusiasm for the visionary aspect of the redesign Prince Rupert piece, and how if you take the big maps that were designed in the planning sessions and imagine that all coming to reality, it would be absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, it's not always quite that simple, and I think against that vision, which I subscribe to, you've got the question of what you would do if the vision's not necessarily going to happen exactly the way you envision it, but there is a real possibility of development happening, which it sounds like there is. And in between the vision and that alternative, which is an imperfect development, you've got real people who own real pieces of land who have real ideas for what they want to do with it. And I think we need to be very cautious about getting in the way of that. So I think I'm probably also leaning towards the idea that the vacant lots, we can regulate what we would do with the vacant lot. But if somebody has a piece of land that they already have a commercial building on, I think absolutely we want those things improved and so on. So I do think that we need to be cautious about trying to regulate it too much. Because if we go too far and it ends up impeding development, then we've really shot ourselves in the foot.
Other comments?
Yeah, Councillor Scott. Here.
Go ahead, read our Councillor Scott Morvan, then Councillor Randhawa.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Ady and agree with a lot of those statements made there, that to be very cautious on impeding future developments and as well as retrofitting existing buildings, those that are already on the tax roll, and that to incentivize a lot of those developments. So I won't repeat a lot of the points that were made by other councillors, so I just wanted to make note of that there. So I'll pass it on to Councillor Randauer.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I still leaning towards our original idea, because our construction is very high, because Muskeg thing, and to encourage the new developers, we give them 10 years and any improvements 5 years. So I like to stick with that idea, if you have a new construction and you can get 10 years incentive if you have any development, new improvements, 5 years. And I don't like to punish anybody. If you own property in Midtown, you don't get like any incentive. And if you go on downtown other side, you get incentive. So I like to stay with everybody, give opportunity to everybody. So I like to stay with like 10 years for new one and 5 years for the any improvements. Thank you.
So I'm just going to jump in again here because I think there's a compromise here because there is I always want to balance vision versus reality. What I don't agree with Councillor Nisha's proposal, because what we want to make sure is that we're not incentivizing commercial development all over the place. Councillor Moreau is correct, fundamentally correct in what the intention is, what we're trying to do with the OCP. And our city manager pointed out that, yeah, everyone still gets to do the commercial. However, reality will dictate that there are people that own businesses and properties right now in the Midtown that will develop in any way they want, whether it's housing or not. And I think if they do develop it anything, which we all know at this point is a positive movement, that there should be some sort of incentive, even if it's a small one, if they choose to go in a direction that's maybe not council's primary objective for Midtown. So for me, if I look at the policy, how it's written, it's got 10 years for commercial, 10 years for multifamily. The only amendment I would make, and that would be versus what Councillor Moreau is saying, is I would just change it in one amendment where it would say something to the effect that if you do commercial in the Midtown, that you would only get like a 3 to 5 year incentive. That's it. It's not the 10-year incentive, because we're not going to incentivize them to go in that area. However, if they do choose, I do believe they should have some sort of benefit where they are able for the first 3 to 5 years recoup some of their costs and get the thing going because they decided to go anyways. But it's not the big carrot. It's not the 10-year one. It doesn't give someone from out of town or anyone else coming in saying, okay, well, clearly we can go anywhere we want because there's no rules and it doesn't matter. We'll get an incentive no matter where we are. I think that would accommodate existing people that want to build new that in commercial in the Midtown, but they're not going to get the 10-year. So I think we would just leave it the same, and then in Midtown we just say it's a 3 to 5 year. Maybe we just even call it 3 years, a very small incentive for commercial. And it's just enough to go, we acknowledge that people may want to do that, but that's not our primary motivation here. However, if you're going to do it, we believe you should have a little bit of a break because you decided to go in any direction, which is a good thing too. And I think that might accommodate what we're trying to get done here. But I do think that if we just do Midtown only incentive and people decide to do, 3 or 4 new commercial areas there and they don't get any incentive, I don't think that's in the spirit. And if those hold back those developments where people are going, well, I was going to do that, now you're not incentivizing me, so I don't think I want to do anything with my properties anymore, and we wait another 5 years for people to do anything around here. The idea is that we want people to do stuff now, and that's why the incentives are only going to be good for 3 years after we pass them. I just want to know if council thinks that's worth doing something like that to accommodate, I think, what Councillor Moreau is saying, which I think he is the most correct right now in terms of what we need to do. But I also agree that there's a reality to what's on the ground, which is there will be people that want to do some commercial there. And I think if they choose to do that, we should give them some benefit, but it's a minuscule benefit in the Midtown particularly only. Everywhere else stays the same, like it's written right now: 10-year commercial, 10-year housing, no matter where you are. But if you're in the Midtown, I would say it's a 3 to 5 year, a 3 to 5 year for commercial, and we would keep it a smaller incentive because that's not the primary goal there. And just to acknowledge to them that, hey, you want to move in that direction. You get some benefit, but that's not what we're trying to incentivize, and that's why if people do housing, they get the 10-year one in the Midtown. What does folks think about something like that? And you know what, Councillor Moreau, what do you think about a compromise like that?
Before I comment on that, can I respond to some of the comments that people have made to my points?
Oh, absolutely.
So, not to be facetious, but like if I had $1 for every time that you guys told me that I'm 100% right on paper or in theory, I'd have a few bucks by now. I think I want to use this example that Councillor Nish did. Let's say, for example, someone wanted to come and build a drive-through in the Midtown District, because I agree with him that there's the reality that the fact that the downtown area has more existing structures and less vacant lots than Midtown. That is the reality on the ground. So if someone comes to us theoretically wants to build a drive-through in Midtown, this incentive program does not discourage them. In fact, it's just like the city manager had mentioned. We're not taking away any of their rights. We're not changing the zoning bylaw. All we're doing is trying to say, this is what we want to ask taxpayers to subsidize in one way, shape, or form, because we believe this is in the public good. So this insinuation that somehow we're discouraging or punishing people, property owners in Midtown, I mean, frankly, it's ridiculous. There's a big difference between offering an incentive and actively discouraging or punishing something. If our objective was something like, let's create more lemonade stands, so we develop a policy to incentivize the development of lemonade stands, are we discouraging or punishing people who want to open a hot dog stand? No, absolutely not. So the other thing that I take offense to is Councillor Cunningham's statement that I'm somehow being short-minded and ignoring the potential for future growth, because this tax incentive suggestion, recommendation, this whole idea of the downtown being too large came directly out of significant resources being put into Vision 2030. So it's the whole reason that Larry Beasley and his team recommended the creation of the Marina District, open up more waterfront and commercial activity around the water, which is one of our most valuable assets. I mean, change does take time. I recognize that. But the plans that we set really do matter. And you don't have to look any further than the original 1908 town site plan and how much our current urban footprint actually still mirrors that plan over 100 years later. So I'm going to go back to this main point. If our objective is to encourage and cluster commercial development in Cow Bay and downtown, it is not discouraging to put that incentive in those places. If our objective is to create more residential in the Midtown District and not commercial, it's not discouraging to say we are going to incentivize the thing that we want. The question really is, in this whole discussion, what are our desired objectives? What are those things that we are going to ask taxpayers to indirectly subsidize? So going all the way back now to Councillor Nish's suggestion for amendment, I'm not totally opposed to that idea of not allowing new commercial builds, because I think one of the objectives that I'm hearing loud and clear from you guys that's not included in my original amendment is that council also wishes to encourage the redevelopment of either worn down or dilapidated buildings. I hear that loud and clear now. So if we added that as an objective, Councillor Nish actually has a suggestion that addresses that. But the insinuation that we're punishing people by not offering them an incentive, I'll go right back to that lemonade stand. We're not discouraging people from opening a hot dog stand by incentivizing a lemonade stand. And I'm sorry if that's too simplistic, but that's honestly what we're getting at here. There's a fundamental difference between offering an incentive and then actively discouraging something.
So, Councillor Morrell, a question for you then. What would you think the resolution, your second amendment, would look like with a bit of incorporation of what Councillor Nish is saying?
Well, it's a little bit tough because it sounds like some of us are open to the concept of restricting new builds versus improvements, whereas some of us want to potentially alter the length of time of the incentive or the percentage. So it's difficult for me to find that consensus. I think the first thing we can do, and I think where we can all find consensus, is if we add to my original suggestion.
Joining the meeting.
We add.
Wait, sorry, I got cut off.
We add, my suggestion for amendment then is we add 3 whereas clauses. The first being, council wishes to encourage the development of multifamily residences in the Midtown District. Second, council wishes to encourage the clustering of commercial development in the downtown and Cow Bay District. And third, council wishes to encourage the redevelopment of existing commercial in the Midtown District. I think that's where we have consensus right now, is on those 3 shared objectives.
Okay, and you know what? I think that makes sense, because then folks that have existing commercial places that maybe even are in operation, and they're like, you know what, we got to tear this thing down and rebuild it. That gives that opportunity, but that's because it's a unique situation for that specific place. But it still opens the door to being the primary tax incentive being the 10-year residential in the Midtown, and I think that's important. What would council see as that type of amendment?
I think. Can I just jump in for one
sorry.
sec?
Go ahead.
Yes. Councilor Nish, sorry, I accidentally got cut off there I missed probably 45 seconds of Blair's conversation there. And so when you were saying your amendments that you were proposing, were you saying that it was similar to what I was suggesting as far as empty lots in Midtown would not qualify for the commercial part of it? Is that correct?
Well, yeah, in essence, that is what I was saying. But what I was suggesting in terms of procedure or process for right now, I think where we all have consensus is in adding a third objective. Well, adding 3 total objectives to the whereas clauses in the start, so that we can all have consensus on what our 3 main objectives are in this tax exemption. That's my first suggestion, and then the second one, the mayor had basically asked me what I think we can do to this point that you and Councillor Cunningham are making, and I think there's some on council that are of the mind that they would want to see, either a reduction in the number of years for the incentive or a reduction in the percentage of the exemption, versus what you had suggested, which is basically not incentivizing any new builds, but only improvements of existing commercial. So that was my suggestion for a compromise.
And I think I would tend to agree with that particular change. So I do agree that we shouldn't do the 10-year tax incentive for commercial in the Midtown. But I think if we do include that, if there is an existing commercial building there that gets rebuilt, that they should qualify. But that also opens it up that the primary incentive is for that Midtown, for any new builds, mostly is just housing. What would council think to that as an amendment?
Hello, Gurvinder here.
Go ahead, Councillor Renha, then Councillor Nish.
So for any improvements, like how much incentive you think like should be good in Midtown?
Well, we're talking about redeveloping commercial buildings. So if they tear them down and rebuild them, that they would qualify for the full incentive, the 10-year. And then any of the renovation ones that's over 50,000 would be, the 5-year like we have it planned out. So what we're saying is, as long as there's an existing commercial that's being redeveloped, they qualify.
Okay, I agree that.
Councillor Morrow, you trying to say something?
Sure.
Sorry, I thought someone was trying to cut in there. Go ahead, Councillor Nish.
Like I say, I mean that's kind of what I was saying right from the get-go, is that if it's existing, let's encourage them as much as we can to do it, and if it's just an empty lot, let's not encourage them for commercial development. And so I'm totally on board with that. I think that's a fair compromise as far as not as far as let's get what we've got fixed up. Like I said, some of these are long-term businesses and investments for people, and I want to see them fix their buildings up, and I think that's the way we need to go. So I am agreeing that any new commercial in that area, that's fine. We'll not give them the incentive, but as far as the existing, let's encourage them as much as we can to fix up what they have.
How do some of the other councillors feel about that?
I could live with that.
Okay, and who else was there? Sorry.
Councillor Adie, I agree with that. I think that's part of what I was getting at is the, really you address what's not there, and you can exert some control over what happens in a place where there is nothing. But at the same time, somebody who's got a business up and running should have that incentive to spruce up their building or replace it if they need to. So I'm in agreement with it as well.
Yeah, Councillor Skelton Morin here. I'll jump in just before we take off again. Just with a lot of the ideas and then kind of the revisions that have been shared, I think a lot of those kind of cross and check off a lot of the boxes. I really like Councillor Moreau's model and then simplifying it and breaking it down. I think that makes a lot more sense to everybody kind of also listening at home, but just for the rest of us to kind of come together to establish some common ground. But I think that, a lot of the points that were made really encompass a lot of those. So a lot of the points that I wanted to make without sounding kind of redundant, repetitive. So a lot of the points that were made prior was that, the more that we encompass into this package and then incentivize those with existing buildings that are having some challenges now. Not that we were going to totally discourage, let's say, the hot dog stands, for example, but more so that if they're not encompassed in that in some way, shape, or form, we're going to just see a lot of hurdles kind of almost inadvertently being created where, if it doesn't necessarily apply to them, maybe, again, I'd make the argument also in agreement that, it doesn't necessarily discourage them, but we'd like to encompass as many as possible into this process so that we can start to see kind of a change in the narrative and a change in the facade of our downtown and start to shift more, again, with the new developments down in the kind of the new downtown in the Marina District.
For some reason, I'm hungry for hot dogs and lemonade now. I'm not sure why, but...
Yeah, lots of hot dogs and lemonade.
So, Councillor Moreau, let's do this in real time then. So, your first amendment was into the whereas section, and you're talking about whereas Council's desire is to incentivize multifamily in Midtown, to cluster commercial in the downtown Cal Bay districts, and to support the redevelopment of existing commercial. That's what you believe should be changed in the whereas sections?
I can actually just email. I've typed all this out. I think I've got it down now. I can email this to the corporate administrator, but I can read it out loud to everyone if that's all right.
Yes,
I think I've captured everything.
I'd like to try to see if we can get this amendment done tonight so that we can move to approval at our next council meeting. I don't want to go back again then. So if you want to read that out and then you can send to the corporate administrator then and capture what we're discussing tonight, that'd be perfect, Councillor Moreau.
Yeah, will do. Okay, so the motion would read that council give third reading to the Downtown Core Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Bylaw number 3466/2020 as amended with the following two further amendments. First, add 3 whereas clauses to the introduction of the bylaw. Council wishes to encourage the development of multifamily residences in the Midtown District. And whereas Council wishes to encourage the clustering of commercial development in the downtown and Cal Bay districts. And whereas Council wishes to encourage the development of existing commercial properties in the Midtown, downtown, and Cal Bay districts. And the second amendment being to modify the Schedule A map of eligible lands to denote that eligible exemptions in the Midtown District are limited to multifamily residential and existing commercial redevelopment.
Okay, are you moving that, Councillor Moreau?
I may as well.
Okay, moved by Councillor Moreau.
Second that, Councillor Skelton Morgan.
Second by Councillor Skelton Morgan. Okay, discussion. How does that sound, everybody?
I think I'll jump in there. Stands, we're okay.
Okay, Councillor Niche, then Councillor Cunningham, and then Councillor Adie.
I think.
And Randhawa, Councillor Randhawa.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Niche.
I believe that that's exactly how I see a good compromise for trying to take advantage of the incentives to, because the reality is the worst part of our town is Midtown, and that's the part that is the tooth of a smile. That is the place that we want to see these buildings fixed, and you know, and I truly believe that you got it all exactly what we need, how we need to put it, Councilor Moreau, and I think that that's a good compromise for you know, moving forward. Like I said, you know, I don't want you to. I mean, I wish you could get rich off me saying things like on paper it sounds good, but on paper it is the right way to go. The other way, but unfortunately we've got an existing town that we have to think about everyone, and I think you captured it on that last try there, and I am fully on board for approving that if we go that route.
Okay, Councillor Cunningham, then 80, then Rantawa.
No, I'm on board with that. It's a good compromise. It gives enough incentive for people that just want to redo their building. You know, empty lots, well, that's a different story, but it's a good compromise. I'm on board with it.
Councillor 80.
Yeah, I'm also on board, and I want to acknowledge the passion for the original vision that exists in the arguments that Councillor Moreau has made. I know many of us were there and part of that process, and I think we all found it very, very invigorating and created a great deal of optimism. And I think the heavy lifting, the hard part is how do you get from there to putting things in place so that things are happening. And I really want to acknowledge the clarity that Councillor Moreau has brought to it. I think, as others have said, I think you really sort of pulled it together in terms of the wording. So thank you for that.
Councillor Ranhawa.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm in favor of the motion, but I just have a quick question, like, should we put those percentage in the motion, or should leave for, like, another side?
Say that again, Councillor Ranhawa.
10%. So should we, like, I was wondering, like, should we put the percentage, like, new improvements or new construction or improvements, like 10 year?
It's already reflected, Councillor Ranhawa. Everything's already reflected in the what's being presented. This amendment will incorporate it as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? All right, I do want to thank Councillor Moreau for your proactive work here on this particular bylaw. I think it's an important one, and I'm very thankful to the discussion tonight. It helped us flesh out exactly what our intentions are here. I think we found the right balance, and I think the community will be pleased with its direction. I'm very eager to get this out so that we can get moving, and I'm looking forward to seeing this town get redeveloped, and I know this is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle that will start to kick off the development environment in this community. We know we need more housing, we know we need new buildings, and we know we need a vibrant cluster of a good downtown core, and I think this will accomplish all of those objectives. So if there's no further comments, I'd entertain the question. So is anybody opposed to the motion? Okay. All in favor then? And Councillor Moreau will email you the... You got him? There you go. Okay, next. Any reports from members of council?
I have one question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Randhawa. So, like, now, like other towns, like people are wondering here, like lots of people approach. So other towns, they're getting vaccines for their residents and also for their health workers. But our community didn't get yet, not even health workers. So you have any idea, or should we write down a letter to Northern Health or Minister?
Yeah, I had a conversation with Northern Health this week. They're going to be putting out an update, I believe either next week or the week after that, but that's completely in their jurisdiction, and they advise that once they know what's going to happen, that the entire community will all know at once. So I think we're going to be hearing some information soon.
We are getting patients now, COVID patients in the hospital, but even our health workers, they don't have any COVID, any vaccine yet. So people are feel a little scared now. So at least health workers or seniors, they should get vaccines like other towns get,
Yeah, and that's going to be up to Northern Health on how that schedule plays out. So they advised me that they will have an update to the community once they're prepared once they have the information. So that's as far as I can answer the question at this point.
Thank you.
Other reports from council? Okay, well, this was our first meeting into 2021, so Happy New Year to all those who are watching. And we're looking forward to having hopefully a more positive year ahead for the community and for our world. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by
Skelton Morgan.
Councillor Skelton Morgan. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Good evening, everybody.